All right, everyone, welcome. As you join in, we're excited to have you, see people coming in. Give me a quick chat in the chat section here if you can hear us, if you can see us, if everything's coming through okay. See more people joining, no chats. Hopefully that means people can hear me. Yep, I can. All right, thank you, Craig. We can hear you. Thank you, Jody. Awesome. All right, well, as people get in, want to welcome you all to the Scaling Presales webinar series. This is adding presales content to outreach. How adding interactive demos can improve your sequences and increase customer engagement. We're really excited to have a panel of experts with us, both from the implementation side, the consensus side, and inside sales side with business development management,
outreach,
from outreach expertise. So we've got Aaron Jamohammed, who is our VP of Marketing here at Consensus. We have TJ Sapper, who we've worked with for a while here from Sapper Consulting, or TJ Mackey, sorry, from Sapper Consulting.
Okay.
And then Ken Amar from Outreach, who's a senior manager over business development there. By way of housekeeping, we want to let you guys know that we've got our third annual Demo Fest coming up. It's going to be May 17th through 19th this year. We've got a lot of really exciting sessions going on from the pre-sales and sales leadership side. Really great practitioner sessions on how to up your demo game and discovery game, and some really great content coming through. And then obviously some consensus specific sessions for our customers and those who are able to be there for that first day.
Real quick, you missed the best part. We do all sessions live.
Yeah, live. Everything is live, just like this is. Everything will be live. So you'll be interacting with Peter and Todd and John and Don and everyone, Julie, everyone who's going to be there. All these thought leaders will be there live for you to pick their brains about these topics. So it's going to be great. I'll drop a link to register in the chat here in a second. We really want to kick this thing off with a question to you, Aaron. Okay. So I'll stop my share and I'll get a question going to you here. This topic came about because we were talking after we launched the outreach integration inside of Consensus about how this is really going to impact the way that sales leaders and pre-sales leaders view customer engagement and on the qualifying side of it. So how does adding pre-sales content to you in inbound and outbound sequences better qualify prospects for sales calls?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, this is kind of a new format for us for a webinar. So hopefully this adds value to everyone, and anything we share, I'm happy to pass along as a resource. I thought it would be helpful to maybe provide some research as background. Now, something that we do every year is we publish a sales engineering workload and comp report, but there's also a lot of research done by Gartner and Forrester and quite a few others around B2B buying and around the pre-sale space specifically, and its implications on sales teams. And that's kind of the world in which we play, is between pre-sales and sales and the alignment between these two organizations. So I'm going to share some data points that I think ought to be valuable, whether or not you're in pre-sales, just good context, good information. So the first thing is just this idea. There's this trend, okay, that we've been monitoring now for the better part of 2 years. The demand for pre-sales now stretches across the entire customer life cycle. So in our last report, we asked pre-sales leaders and individual contributors, what are the teams that you support? And are there teams that you support exclusively? And for the first time ever, pre-sales teams told us that they support sales less than 2% of the time exclusively. Now, sales represents the biggest bucket of support, but they're getting pulled into conversations with customer success, with marketing, with BD. And we've been wondering, why is this happening? Why is it that pre-sales is getting there's so much demand for them, and it's really being driven by buyers. So let me take a step back. There's kind of this famous slide. It came out maybe 3 years ago from Gartner about the messiness, the chaoticness of buying from the buyer's perspective. So they just released another B2B tech buying report. They updated this buying journey illustration. And I think part of the intent behind this is just to show how chaotic buying is. So there's this notion, amongst sellers that we're the ones closing deals. And, consensus, we have this very firm belief that sellers do not close deals, only buyers can. One of the data points within this Gartner research is that buyers spend only 16% of their time in a buying cycle in direct contact with all vendors. So if there are 4 vendors, each one on average gets about 4% of that buyer's attention while they're going through the process of building the business case, involving stakeholders, doing research, building criteria. It's like painfully little time, that narrow window within which vendors have to influence buying decisions. And you wonder, well, okay, if that's all the time they're spending with us, what are they doing the rest of the time? In between all of our meetings, what are buyers actually spending their time on? They're selling, right? They're the ones building the case. They're the ones pulling in executives and sponsors and convincing people to make changes and building out change management programs and doing the research. So they're the ones that are doing the bulk of the selling. And so there's this need to shift the way that we think about things. And because of the fundamental shift in B2C, it's now translating into fundamental shifts in expectations in B2B. And so we see that buyers just expect different experiences now, right? And they won't tolerate bad, painful, complex processes anymore. At least they have the flexibility not to have to accept that. And so the next step of that question is, well, what are the kinds of things that they get the most value from? I don't have the chart here, but one of the questions that Gartner asks in their research is, what is the most valuable interaction that you have with a vendor? It's the product demonstration. It's the interaction they have with the pre-sales. And that might be confusing because you're thinking like, well, the sales rep is there like from start to finish. Why is it pre-sales? Well, because pre-sales is perceived as, one, not having an agenda. They come and they talk about product. They kind of make the connection between solution and impact with the buyer. So they're viewed as this unbiased, credible source, and they're a subject matter expert and they're a product expert. And usually what they bring is very authentic and they do a lot of the planning and the architecting. So buyers have this implicit trust in pre-sales. And so what's happening? Marketing sees this, BDs see this, customer success sees this, and they're starting to loop in pre-sales and make requests for pre-sales content at all stages in the customer lifecycle. And so I think that's really what's driving it, is just that there's this demand and it's surged across that entire buying journey. Because vendors have such little time, they're trying to optimize what time they have. And that means they're bringing in pre-sales earlier on and keeping them on much later than maybe historically we've seen. And so things like product demonstration, we'll get into the content later if you want to ask that question. I'm probably talking way more than I need to, but I think this provides at least a foundation for why this conversation is relevant, and why it's so critical. This was one of the questions that we asked, is just the breakdown of different activities from the pre-sale side. And I mean, these are all customer facing interactions, right? Obviously, there's a lot of things that pre-sales teams do and should do, and they're not always aligned. And there's a whole conversation we can have later on about the pre-sales bottleneck and how that's actually affecting deal cycle times. And it's probably the lowest hanging fruit if you want to shorten sales cycles, is to amplify and to scale pre-sales. But I think I may have answered your question. Do you mind repeating it, Garrett, just to make sure I didn't miss anything?
It was about qualification and just where, how adding pre-sales content to inbound and outbound, sequences and templates and outreach is going to better qualify those.
Yeah. So, with what I've set up as sort of the premise, if the interactions they have with the vendor are limited and they're expecting high value, and they don't want to wait, and they can't tolerate bad experiences anymore, and the thing that they really value most is pre-sales, it stands to reason that we've got to somehow elevate the things that pre-sales does a little bit more. We've got to make those assets and those resources and that kind of consulting available again, earlier on and make it available long after they actually become a customer. Things like discovery and FAQs and POCs and any kind of consulting. These are things that can happen, at a different pace than maybe what most technical sales teams are used to. And I think that's kind of the context is like, all right, if they want authentic and they want planning and they want it now, well, find a way to give that to them. That's one of the quickest ways to move deals along.
Awesome. Thank you. Ken, interested in, TJ, looked like you wanted to say something.
Ken's a pro. I want to hear Ken's thoughts, then I'll chime in.
Yeah.
Boom.
So Ken, wanted your thoughts on this, and then I got a question for you.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's interesting you bring up that point, Aaron. I see this a lot on the inbound side, right? So I've been with Outreach now for about 4 years. Our inbound team, they're taking demo pricing requests. Over the course of the last 4 years, things have gotten exceptionally technical, right? A lot of buyers, they're looking at a bunch of different vendor solutions. They want their answers. They want them now. And they're getting we're getting a lot of questions on the BD side around can you show me how this integration works? Can you show me a brief overview of the platform? So integrating a lot of that pre-sales content into our inbound sequences has seen a lot of success. An interesting thing to note as well too, our sales process on the inbound side has changed a little bit slightly, right? We now have a standing weekly, hour-long demo fest of some sorts with our pre-sales engineers, right? We funnel all of our inbound leads to that as kind of a first step in the process versus just handing them over to a sales rep, right? And kind of to your point, we've seen sales cycles kind of accelerate as a result of that. So especially on the inbound side, we've seen a lot of changes.
That's amazing, especially when you can. So when you consider the product demo specifically, since you brought it up, one of the most valuable interactions is just getting familiar with the solution and how it adds value and the different value benefits that people like to pitch. But if you're having to wait a week or 2 weeks before you see that from the time you make a request, man, that kills things. All that heat kind of fizzles out. That's what we saw in the report. I have a slide I can show later, but the average buyer has to wait, I think it's 5.6 days, so over a week before they see their first demo. Can you think of any other process where somebody makes a request and you wait a full week before you deliver on that? How does that hurt or impact the kind of experience that they have overall? And that's not to mention all the other stakeholders that have to get engaged in a process. Like if that's the experience for just one stakeholder, and then you start mapping out the organization, and then it's pretty soon it's 2 months before you get everyone just that first intro demo. That can break things up. That's really fascinating.
For sure. TJ, I want to come at you with this, and then you can weigh in on anything else too. But along that, there's got to be, a best practice to help companies implement that. And in your experience at Sapper, I know that you guys have helped people specifically with this problem. So what have you seen as some of the best practices for adding these digital demos in there and, for lack of a better phrase here, doing it right?
Yeah, I can share some thoughts on what some great options are, some of those best practices. But I think, to close the loop on what both Ken and Aaron shared, the tolerance, there's been a lot of tolerance, right, for salespeople slowing down the process and saying, oh, you got to wait, we got to get the VP before you can see the product. And, these false gates that are seller centric and not buyer centric. And the world is, the Twitter sphere is abuzz with how much, the selling journey is changing to a buying journey, to Aaron's point. And, nowadays it's considered, foolish if you're not delivering product, price, and pace on that first call. That is a missed opportunity. Product, what exactly does this thing do? Price, how much is it going to cost me? And pace, how long do I have to wait until I get to be successful or receive the impact? And if you're making people wait, to Aaron's point, it's a week before they can even get just some frame of reference for what those points are going to be. You're missing out, and you're de-accelerating your deals and likely missing out on opportunities to get more of the buying committee involved earlier. So I think that's huge. And I think with that, best practices, I think we'll probably get into some of the meat of this as we get a little further in the conversation. But it comes back to a simple principle like segmentation. So who are we talking to at this point, and what matters to them? I think that's what's so powerful about consensus is it's not making some mass blast video that we make once and send out to everyone in the world forever. I think what's powerful, and this is the mission of pre-sales, is like, how do we make something that's deeply relevant and contextual and valuable to where this specific buyer is, but how do we do that at scale in a way that, represents the enterprise and protects governance and some of these other points that, the folks have struggled to optimize. So I think segmentation is always a really big thing that we come back to as a best practice. And then, having a really candid conversation. It's always better to introduce the human element, of course, keep things professional, but how do we have an honest conversation, a human conversation, to help cut through, what otherwise can feel like a cold initial contact? Because that's the thing we want to avoid. If they wanted to read the website, they would have read the website. This is an opportunity for humans to connect on solving a problem. And the folks that are using consensus the best, consensus and outreach together inside of, a buying cycle and a selling cycle, they do that really well.
A couple of quick points. First of all, thank you for saying relevancy at scale. I hear so often people talk about personalization in a vacuum. Personalization alone is not what moves people. It's relevancy. So personalized relevancy, I guess you could call it. That at scale should be a strategic initiative. One thing I wanted to point out, Garrett, it would be great, since we're trying this kind of panel type environment, it's a bit freeform. I'd love for the attendees, all of you listening in, if you have any questions or disagreements even with what we're saying, I'd love to be able to tailor our comments to what you're hearing and what you'd like to hear, just in case we're missing the mark. So let's make this interactive. If there's any additional questions about this topic or any other topic, that'd be awesome. All right, Garrett, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead and drop those in the chat. We're anxious to hear your guys' side of all this. Yeah, so great thoughts on those best practices. I'd love to hear from Ken and from TJ about this, since you guys are such outreach experts, and even Aaron. What are some of the maybe lesser known or lesser celebrated benefits of adding digital demos alongside your outreach workflow?
So I think for the business development side, right? I think I speak for a lot of outbound SDRs when one of the most common objections we get is, all right, what does your platform do? I think Aaron, you brought that up. TJ, you brought that up as well too. Like you can talk about value, ROI, but a video or a picture really paints 1,000 words, right? So that's one of the most common objections we get. Or when you're actually even confirming a meeting with an account executive, we like to send out like digital video content ahead of time of the actual platform itself, so it kind of contextualizes what the buyer is seeing.
I think that's a fantastic best practice. And, I think one of the things I would pile on to that, and it's in particularly valuable for that BD play, is like engagement tracking. So this is one of the superpowers of outreach, right? Like we're able to send, content, we're able to start a sequence or, use templates, and then we get to see folks react to that, engage, open and click even before a reply happens. And so then we can do, the best companies do really sophisticated motions based on that. Well, adding consensus to that outreach intelligence just supercharges that to a really awesome degree. You've got visibility, and for folks that are already using it, this, but you can see who interacted with the videos, how long did they forward along to someone else, did someone else you didn't expect engage with the content. And I think that's where you get some really special magic. And for folks running account-based motions, you can accelerate, engaging that larger buyer committee way faster than if you waited for formal introductions, that your buyer is understandably going to be hesitant to do right off the bat.
Yeah, one of my favorite things, sorry, Aaron, I cut you off here.
No,
one
go
of my
ahead.
favorite things is the sentiment area in outreach, right? That you're talking about there, where you can see, how your email is resonating. And then, by adding that demo or that pre-sales content into it, how that's impacting, how that resonates with the audience. I love that.
So I wanted to add to this just a couple of points of reference. So number one, I thought I didn't have this chart. I pulled it. This is an old one. This is from 2017 from Gartner, but they actually have a newer one that more than emphasizes some of the same figures. But if you looked a couple of years ago, what was, the most valuable forms of provider channel partner marketing materials? Demonstrations is number one. Value assessments number three. Case studies can come from, product marketing. It can be sent by sales, but a lot of this stuff is stuff that's influenced or informed by the pre-sales team. obviously, especially the demonstration. But further context, when we talk about demos, product demonstrations, most people think in terms of one of two demo types. They think of a standard demo, which is generic, not customized, and they think of the very customized technical demo. Only those two, right? We've done a ton of research. So that we've done this proprietary research looking at thousands of different companies and demos delivered and how they're delivered and the kinds of information that are covered in those demos. Can you guys see my screen, by the way?
Yep.
Okay. And we've got, ebooks and infographics up the wazoo talking about the 6 demo types. But this is something that most people don't realize, is that there aren't just 2 types of demos. There are 6 types of demos that can be delivered throughout the customer journey. Not all of them have to be. And not any one of them needs to be delivered just once. And what was I going to say? 5 of the 6. Yeah, 5 of the 6 can be automated. So when you talk about digital assets, Ken, and we talk about how can we incorporate outreach into this. One of the reasons why we are very selective in who we partner with in our ecosystem is because we want to make sure that our platform can work where people work. Well, from an outreach perspective, it's like, if 5 of 6 demo types can be automated and delivered as an interactive, personalized, but digital experience, we can free up a huge bottleneck by making these available within a platform like Outreach, and maybe map our product demonstration strategy to something that's more aligned to how buyers buy. And what I mean by that is, when I said there's 2 types of demos that most people think about, that standard generic demo is not as standard or generic as a lot of people think. It doesn't have to be. A lot of times they cover vision demo type material or micro type material or FAQ type material in those demos, and they just call it the standard demo. But the reality is you can break these things up by role, by phase in the customer journey, by area in the company, and really enrich the experience and manage this entirely out of Outreach, which was kind of the cool integration that we were able to create. But the more fundamental point I wanted to make is just this idea that I think we need to start thinking about demonstrations a little bit differently, expand our view, because as you see on the right-hand side of this chart, buyers have different needs at different stages. So to think that there's just 2 demos for the entire buying journey, I think is a bit limiting, especially when you factor in that for pre-sales, at least, so much of what they're doing are just those standard intro demos, and they're kind of on auto repeat, and it kind of creates this bottleneck. And then 30% of those end up being unqualified because they've not mapped out their strategy to different demos or incorporated any digitization in their approach. And so I think meshing these 2, the digital side with a different kind of approach to demos, I think is a really powerful way to accelerate deals, get to revenue faster and improve the effectiveness of both your sales and your pre-sales organization.
And I think this is a really important point, and something that I wanted to sort of jump on top of while you're saying this, is that even inside of these 6 demo types, you are likely to have further segmentation. And I think people hear, like digital automation and demo automation, and they think of, like some sort of, like email content equivalent, right? Where there's some email that has been written relatively generically for a stage in the buying cycle and it gets automated. And, the best folks aren't doing that. And the best folks aren't doing that with these digital demos. There's having a segmented buyer persona specific conversation for the specific stage in the journey. And it's diversified. And that's how you are able to, again, it comes back to relevancy at scale. And so I think that's a really important thing to pile on here, is this isn't just creating one vision demo, one micro demo, you know what I mean? Like, you've got these broken out by roles, by buyers, by the committee, by use case, so that it is relevant. Even with
that's a good point.
TJ, I'm really glad you brought that up. It's interesting. I was on a conversation with our CRO and some of the other sales leaders, and we're doing exactly this, right? Across every different market segment, across even BD, CSMs, our AE team as well too. We've already built 3 of these automated demos, and it's kind of interesting seeing how the market's operating that way.
Oh, that's cool.
So powerful.
Really cool. So what is the pushback that you guys have seen happens when people don't understand this concept and how it's beneficial to the buyer's journey?
I mean, I'll jump in really quick and just say that as with any new technology, there's going to be resistance to change and skeptics. And, it's why change management is so important to introducing anything as thoughtful as this technology. And I'll just share that, I've seen folks be resistant to this because of the conversation we just had. They hear the word automation and they go, I'm selling to the enterprise. You're not automating anything. Like get that away from me, because you're gonna send something to the manager of sales and the CRO at the same time, and it's gonna be terrible. Like, don't kill my deals. And so you have to of course walk through how this works in a really thoughtful way, so that folks can appreciate that this isn't another version of spray and pray. In fact, this is something far more thoughtful, and can be very powerful when partnered with a platform like Outreach.
Yeah, there's something short-sighted about that notion. The get away from me, don't talk about automation. I mean, we live in a different era than before. And what I mean by that is I would venture to say that at least a third of the jobs we do don't need to be done, at least not in the level of priority that most often we put them. There are a lot of jobs that are important, but maybe don't require the human touch. And this is what buyers are experiencing. There's a lot of things that they do that don't require, live interaction, that can be done automated. And to take that approach, I think, is short-sighted. There's a principle that it's, it always bothers me as a marketer and as a former sales rep. I always hated when people said, we're all about productivity. Well, productivity, independent of anything else, is just doing more. So if you're already not doing the right things, you're trying to go after productivity, it's doing more of the wrong things. So it's not just about more, but better, and then more. So if you can get more done, then get more done, but make sure that you're doing more of the right things and not just more things. And this is where I think there's value in automation, not to strip away people's jobs, but we always tell people, if they're doing a ton of demos, it's not necessarily that you're doing a ton of demos that's wrong. It's you're doing a lot of the wrong demos. Do more of the right demos with qualified prospects, with the right people at the right state. Like, reorient your thinking, change the position of the window so you're looking out at the right landscape. That's really where the value comes in. No, not every repetitive harbor tour intro demo needs to be done live. A lot of that can be automated. This is the advantage of technologies that are pursuing PLG, for example. Product-led growth is we've now been conditioned as buyers to experience things and to understand stuff through an experiential layer, rather than having to wait for live interactions. And more of that's going to take over B2B. And it's just a matter of embracing that in appropriate way so that we can apply our resources in the best way possible.
Definitely. And one of the things that makes me think of is, just the fact that you get to take, in a demo library, or the content that you're adding in these automated, intelligent demos, is you're basically taking, your best SE. So, you think of, if TJ does the best harbor tour demo, have TJ record that. We can include that in our inbound and outbound sequences. And that way everyone gets the TJ experience. And how much better is that buyer's journey going to be when everyone gets the TJ experience instead of the Garrett experience, if I'm not as good at the harbor tour demo, right?
Real quick, since we're piling on, and that's kind of the mode here, let me pile on one more thing. The question about, so broadening the aperture, so we're not just looking at demos, even though that's kind of a focus of the conversation. I want to go back to something that we talked about earlier, and that's just, broadly speaking, if there's more demand for pre-sales, demos included, but everything else that pre-sales historically has been a central part in providing to customers, how much of that can you, or should you map your pre-sales bandwidth to and make available in digital channels that maybe a lot of people aren't thinking about, if that sentence makes sense? This is just a quick snapshot of at least some of the core pre-sales related content pieces that we found to be most valuable, and including in either your product demos, your automated demos, or as supporting materials for those demos. It's not a comprehensive list, but when we start thinking about, once a customer gets engaged and we start to qualify them, what are some of the things, the packet of goods throughout the course of their buying journey, especially in technical sales, that they're going to need to have to make a decision with confidence? Because in a technical sales environment where there's 20 people making a decision or involved in the buying group, and there's a lot of business case building to have to go through. It's more than just a slide deck that you pass along that's going to have to move the needle. And I made this point before that sellers don't close deals, buyers close deals. Your job as a seller or a pre-sales rep is to be a buyer coach. You're going to have to help them through that journey, since they're doing the bulk of the selling on their own between your meetings with them. Well, what does that look like? It right now looks very complex, painful, and slow. It should be, pleasant, simple, fast. We can aid that by drafting the kinds of content that are going to help them make the case internally a little bit easier. So we'll provide this as a resource if you want, or you can take a screenshot, but consistently, this is represents 90% of the stuff that pre-sales teams can offer as supporting materials throughout the course of a technical sales journey.
Awesome. Great insight there.
All right. Before we jump off of that, I'll just again pile on. That's the theme. The major value too that I'd call out to all of those points is for anyone that's operating in a large, complex sales motion. It doesn't just have to be enterprise, but it's often enterprise customers. If you have a global theater, then you are very likely, a lot of the customers we interact with, drowning in content, right? You've got a fantastic product marketing team, you've got a fantastic demand gen team, everyone's producing more content than ever before. And it is wonderful. It's nuanced, it's segmented, it's buyer first, but there's just so much of it. And so to equip sellers, and this is a sales enablement and product marketing problem to solve, how do we get the right content to the right sellers, to the right buyers, to the right personas? And how does this need to be governed by global theater, by different product segments? A lot of folks are moving to the more thoughtful solution-based selling. If we're doing that, we need to be able to speak to a collective of solutions, not just a single product demo. So I think this is one of the areas, you called out earlier, like where's a sort of unsung benefit of, digital pre-sales automation. This being able to govern and curate this content for a global sales workforce is a massive advantage. And in particular, when layered with outreach, because this is one of outreach's superpowers, it can sort of make music out of the noise when you've got a large, complex sales team.
Definitely. We actually had a question come in on the line while you were doing this, TJ. Ken, why don't you take a crack at this one first before the rest of the panel here? What is the best approach? Sorry, this came from Carly. So thank you, Carly, for the question. What is the best approach to embed the demos into outreach when creating manual or automated emails?
So it honestly depends on the type of sequence, right? So for a cold outbound sequence, it should be like the last step. But if they're actually involved in the buying cycle, if they're interested, you can make that as a step one in like a manual sequence.
And you actually have, Garrett, you have a screenshot to show how it can be done either in a template or just as a quick link, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So I can pull that slide up here.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. The intent here is to make it as simple as possible. So we can basically accomplish the integration in one slide if you want to pull it up.
Yeah. So here it is. So there's a quick look at the integration. And so, for those who use Consensus and Outreach, if you've used Consensus before, you've probably seen this where you can add right here your demo as you're going through. And you can do that in a variety of forms. You can do it as a link, so you can link it to text. You can do it as the video with the play button here, like you see it there. You can do it as an animated photo, like a GIF, or you can do it as just a static image. And so, there's a variety of ways. And I love what Ken said. It depends on where you are and what type of sequence it is. Whether that's inbound or outbound, whether it's the breakup email or you're answering a question because that person came inbound. TJ, love your thoughts on this too.
Yeah, so yes to all of the above. A really nimble use case we've seen be successful is using snippets because it can be pulled into different parts of the sequence. And so that's especially if you've got sort of a segmented relevancy at scale demo that can be plugged into multiple places, the snippet can be a really valuable way to put that into action. And then I wouldn't say that this is a best practice, but something interesting that I've seen work well for some particular customers and particular use cases is actually to have like a video only sequence that has a series of touches that are parts of the, it doesn't have to be a whole demo, but short snippets of video that kind of walk through a product value journey. Typically, that's going to be relevant for folks that are earlier in the buying and evaluation cycle. And then based on engagement, you're going to trigger them into a follow-up sequence that's primarily emails and phone calls. And so that's kind of a neat business development play that we've seen that's worked really well for some folks that I would say is worth experimenting on, for those that are curious.
What's cool about it is both platforms have fairly robust analytics. So I won't speak to the outreach analytics, but obviously you can monitor and engage the success of sequences and steps within sequences. And then within consensus, anyone who engages with those demos, you get consumption analytics, any net new stakeholders with whom demos are shared are added as new contacts. You can see which features, categories, or value benefit selections they've made. So you can gauge what are the things that they're most interested in. So it's almost like pairing up the sequence successes and then the consumption analytics as a 1-2 punch is a really powerful way to make sure that when you do finally have contact and make that first live call, it feels a lot more like third calls. In fact, that's one of my favorite, I think it was a G2 Crowd review that we validated with customers, at least on our platform, is one of the biggest benefits is that first calls feel more like third calls because they go into that knowing how much of a demo or a solution the customer's already previewed, who they previewed it with, what selections they've made, and what matters most to them, which is usually something you don't get to until the third or fourth call. And then, of course, the engagement success that you get when you can monitor the success of different sequences and steps is really powerful too.
Awesome. Great stuff. TJ, you had another thought?
Yeah, sorry, just one more use case that I've seen be really valuable. These videos can be really fantastic follow-up touches. So just calling out that, and again, just where this fits in the workflow is highly contingent on a lot of internal strategy and practices. I don't want to make anything too general, but just calling out that a lot of times follow-up touches by salespeople, sales development folks can tend to be pretty generic and flat. And very us focused as a seller. And so being able to leverage a platform like this to follow up with something that is a give and relevant to whatever their inquiry or interest was. Hey, just wanted to, I know last time we talked about, the fact that sequences can trigger activity based on certain types of engagement. Wanted to send you a quick follow-up on what exactly that looks like and why it drives higher outcomes to meetings booked, whatever it is. It's a value give. It's still a touch that reminds them of the conversation, but it's not any thoughts, which has its place, but is more valuable to the buyer.
Definitely love it. We actually had another question come in. So with this one from Jamie Taylor, is there a way to automate engaged members to be pulled from the video sequence over to the follow-up sequence?
I don't believe there is. I think you can set up triggers for phone calls, but there's not a way to automatically pull them into the next sequence. Not at the moment, at least.
Okay, great thought. Could be something for down the road here as we iterate on the integration.
Well, just real quick, I don't know if this helps, but so marketing uses demo links in some of our sequences. We're also on outreach, and we've set up triggers, at least within HubSpot, our CRM, that when something's viewed or shared, it alerts the BDs, and then I think it automatically enrolls that contact. So it's kind of a jerry-rigged way of doing it, but we've figured out a way within the CRM to be able to automate a flow, or at least trigger a flow, if I'm not mistaken. If you want more information on that, I'll ask my SDR manager, but you can ping me on LinkedIn and I'll follow up with you.
Awesome.
See, automation is so powerful.
Automation can be powerful when it's done well. So what, as we near sort of the end of our time here, I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this from each of you. as companies consider doing this, as companies want to add pre-sales content to their outreach sequences, what do each of you believe is the most important step to take first? What is that first thing that they absolutely have to do to get this right?
So from my perspective, having just covered the 6 demo types, it would be to understand how your demo strategy maps to those different demo types. The reason why that's the first step is because then you can decide how you automate them and which ones you can turn into digital assets that can be incorporated into outreach. Unless you do that, you're going to probably continue to operate under the assumption that everything has to be done live when it really doesn't. There are different types of content and presentations and communications that you can make available within a digital sphere that we've incorporated into our sequences. I'll give you one example. So when we're going through a sales motion, every customer, they have InfoSec questions, right? Security questions, GDPR, SOC 2. So we have a short automated demo video on covering all security related concerns that we initiate when we make contact with the customer. After there's a certain level of qualification, we plug them into a set of sequences, and that's one of our automated demos that we send out to prospects. It almost eliminates the need to have those follow-up CIO, InfoSec discussions, because we've cleared that up at the beginning of the conversation. So for us, that's just one example of maybe 5 or 6 where we've been able to handle a lot of these common type presentation scenarios within the platform that we can incorporate into our outreach sequences, and it accelerates deals. On average, our customers see, anywhere between 30 and 50% reduction in sales cycle time just by taking care of this one motion. It's a function of the fact that there is this long wait time between demo request and demo delivery, and the fact that so much time is wasted, 30 to 50% on unqualified demos. You clear those 2 things up with the right kind of digital demo strategy, automated demo strategy. Like I said, it's like one of the lowest hanging fruit opportunities to speed up sales cycles.
Great. All right, TJ and Ken, your thoughts.
All right. I would say the most important, or I don't know, most important is awful big. I would say one of the first things that I'd recommend doing is really making sure you understand how this changes the workflow, the day-to-day of the folks using it. So if this is really just going to be used by very specifically pre-sales folks, then the locus of control and the change is probably relatively small, depending on how manual their prior work was. If you're going to roll this out to multiple roles within the company, if you're going to have sellers and or SDRs or others doing digital demos, you really need to be thoughtful about how different this is from what they're doing today. Is this far more automation? Is this far less? Is it more thoughtful? Is it less thoughtful? And just that change, and I know it's, some folks talk about a lot, change management. It's so critical though, because if folks don't believe in it, they're, unintentionally going to sabotage it. And too often, not necessarily with this, we've seen wonderful tools that can drive major value, not reach their potential fast enough because we weren't considerate of how this affects folks' day-to-day life and the change that's involved. So I would say, first and foremost, really understand, how does this change, the end users that are using it? Are we explaining them to the why? What's the process to get everyone feeling confident in the approach? Because the tools can be orchestrated in really thoughtful ways, but often the people's feelings are the things that are the first to get in the way, which is okay. It's valid, and we gotta respect that.
I think, Eric, you had a very timely question, right? So I'm thinking about the conversation we've had today. Aaron and TJ all hit some really valid points, and they're all really resonating with me because we're doing exactly what they're saying right now here at Outreach, right? There's 6 different types of demos. We've got to segment it across role, across market segment, but the first 2 things we're knocking out right now are for our BDR SCR team, like a shorter automated demo. What exactly is outreach? What is task flow? What does executing tasks in outreach look like? And the second thing is for our AE team, right? Aaron, I think you mentioned like pre-sales helps speed up the sales cycle, right? We all know this. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of pre-sales folks, right? Their bandwidth gets stretched pretty thin. So we're building out, I think it's like a 15-minute, a little more contextualized demo on our pre-sales folks side to help our AEs accelerate the sales cycle, right? So we're literally doing everything we're speaking of as we speak of it.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. All right. Are there any other questions online here in chat? I'm not seeing anything in QA. If not, we'll just ask for any closing thoughts from our panel here.
I'm good.
All right. Appreciate you all coming. This is a really great topic, really great discussion. Appreciate our panel. Ken, TJ, Aaron, thank you for joining us for this. Thank you all for coming. There's a short survey at the end if you want to know more, just asking if you want more information about this integration between these two platforms. And hopefully we can get your questions answered there. And if not, then shame on us. But here we go. Thank you all again for coming, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye.